Right now, Bill de Blasio heads to Albany, throwing his political leverage into the fight over universal pre-K. He says it's a matter of principle that the city should be able to tax itself. Will either argument play well in the State House? And then he played forever in the NFL, 14 seasons. But now 2 terms and done for lineman turned Congressman Jon Runyon. So what's pushing him out the door? The dysfunction in Congress and in his own party. And later, the president of France is splitting with his girlfriend, the First Lady. It is making headlines there, where private lives usually tend to stay private. But can you imagine what if that happened here? We'll do just that tonight. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us on this Monday evening, January the 27th. We begin tonight with the pre-fight over pre-K. Universal pre-kindergarten has become one of the hot topics for progressives and Democrats this winter. And today, the man many say made it such a big deal, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio went to Albany to pitch his pre-K plan. His Honor was armed with a report outlining a plan that would cover 73% of all city 4-year-olds and get them into classes this coming fall, and cover all city 4-year-olds by the fall of 2015. The cost, $340 million a year, or about 10 grand a student, though we should point out the tax plan he is calling for would raise about $500 million a year. Of course, the de Blasio plan not universally loved, especially not by Governor Andrew Cuomo, who has pitched his own pre-K plan that would not raise taxes. The mayor responding to that with this quote: "There are some who say Albany shouldn't approve our plan because the state government simply cannot raise any taxes right now. That is not the debate," says the mayor. "We're simply asking Albany to allow New York City to tax itself." De Blasio expanding on that argument as he testified before the Budget Committee in Albany today.
The city's right to self-determination, to setting and carrying out our own priorities, should be honored in Albany. Universal pre-K and after-school programs must have a dedicated funding stream, a lockbox, shielded from what we all know is the inevitable give and take of the budgeting process.
Afterwards, the mayor and the governor met for a press conference, all smiles and even a backslap, at least in public. And de Blasio appears to have some friends in Albany on pre-K and other issues. Assembly Speaker and Albany powerhouse Sheldon Silver, who seems to be backing a de Blasio-like agenda. Silver telling the Times, "Not since Mayor Dinkins left town have we had someone at City Hall who shared a lot of our views, and that de Blasio's election gives a lot of credibility to issues we've raised over the years." Silver even signaling that he could back Team de Blasio on the pre-K fight as well. So let's get into this with some analysis from our post-K panel. Jeannie Zaino is here, professor of political science at Iona College, professor of campaign management at NYU. Welcome. Dominic Carter here, of course, political journalist and author. And Richard Brodsky, former New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, and professor at NYU. Good night for NYU in the house tonight. Professor Brodsky, let me start with you. The argument that the city should be able to tax itself. First, just explain why New York City can't just tax itself.
No locality can tax itself in most areas without the permission of the state government, because that's the way the home rule system of New York State has been set. There are things local governments can do without permission. There are things that we oversee. It's not a bad plan. When Westchester County wanted to put in a bizarre sales tax thing, it was the delegation that stopped it and made it much more acceptable. That being said, there are political reasons to let them do what they want to do. De Blasio's argument is essentially not legal. He's wrong. His political and social arguments, I think he's right. I think he's got a lot of friends in the legislature, and I think it's going to be tough for Cuomo to hold out.
Well, and I want to get into the pre-K on the merits, but I want to start at that sort of elevated, with the elevated issue. Should municipalities, should local governments be able to tax themselves, or at least to decide these things on their own? I know they can't right now, but should they?
Strong argument can be made either side of this issue. Mayor Bloomberg, I disagree with my esteemed colleague here, who is from the Albany crowd and knows the legislature well. But Mayor de Blasio is asking Albany to give up power. Imagine that.
No,
yes, he is. He wants Albany to give up power, to get out of the way so that the city can tax itself. It's not going to happen. Look how long it took Albany to give New York City control over the issue of education. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. And I don't care how much the speaker flirts with this, it's not going to get past Governor Cuomo.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a political standpoint, he's absolutely right to bring it up. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's a way to pressure the legislature into supporting his argument. On the pre-K thing, I think his argument, his most solid argument, is that Cuomo's numbers don't add up when you're talking about quality pre-K. And when you look at least his numbers so far, and again, in his defense, we haven't seen those numbers specifically yet, but if you look at the data, everybody agrees pre-K is necessary, but if it's going to work, it's got to be quality. And, you know, there's ways to define quality, and that takes money. And Cuomo hasn't given us the idea that we could have that money via the state the way he wants to do it without taxes. So I think that's de Blasio's strongest argument. But hey, if I was de Blasio, I would say, let us tax ourselves as well, because it's a way to pressure the legislature. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a way to pressure the legislature.
He's wrong.
But I'm right, Richard,
well,
right?
I haven't gotten to you yet. He's wrong because, well, you were wrong too. Let me start with you.
Okay,
It wasn't a matter of pressuring the legislature. The legislature is supportive of de Blasio's position. The Assembly majority will support the surcharge.
But are they supportive of, I'm not talking about the pre-K, I'm saying about giving New York City the ability to tax themselves without.
At least in this
with-
one
that's
circumstance,
not,
this one case.
That's
Without
not on the
Albany
table.
stepping
No one
back.
has asked that the rules be changed. They've asked for permission to do this one tax. In that case, the Democratic majority in the Assembly and the independent Democrats and the regular Democrats in the Senate both support this. The roadblock is the governor. This is not about power. This is about
This is everything to do with power.
This is about politics. The legislature has a role in making sure that local taxation doesn't get nutty. If the city wants to raise the property tax, it can do so without permission from the legislature. If it wants to raise the sales tax or the income tax, that's when the legislature comes in. This is not a terrible system, Dominic.
But you're saying it's about politics and not about power. Dominic, I mean, you could argue that they're the same thing. Politics is power, power is politics.
The bottom line, if you're Governor Cuomo, he's saying, listen, I'm giving you what you want. You want universal pre-K, you're going to get it. You're not going to get it with the method that you want, because then the governor is saying, are you pulling a classic bait and switch? What are you going to do with the rest of that money?
He's right now.
And now, oh, now I'm right.
That doesn't happen often. Let's recognize it when it does.
And the rest of the money is for those union contracts.
That's the strongest argument de Blasio has, and it's real. But what's at stake, if you want to talk the politics, is Cuomo's positioning himself as an anti-tax candidate in 2014. He's an austerity, Paul Ryan, Tea Party, Republican on economic issues. What he doesn't want is to have that image tarnished by agreeing to a tax in New York City.
We agree.
That, and de Blasio is a big tax the rich, invest, pay out, hire more municipal workers, and that's how you stimulate the economy. It's a fight about economic vision as much as it is about a particular
And that's
tax.
why I said it's a fight over power. Whose vision is going to win? Governor Cuomo, who is the top dog for the state, says, listen, we have to work together, but at the end of the day, you will see my way.
The de Blasio argument that, well, the funding might be here this year, but there's no guarantee that it'll be here next year, and if you let me do it my way, the funding will be here every single year. I mean, you know as well as anybody how budgets can change from one year to another.
He's right about that, but he's right. That doesn't mean that's not the winning argument. The winning argument is much more tied up in an election in which he got elected as an avatar of a new kind of democratic economic theory. Invest, tax the rich, income inequality ends. Cuomo set himself up as the opposite of that. That's the clash that has to be resolved.
We had a kumbaya moment on the panel when everybody was in agreement. So I'm wondering if there's any way that we can do that if this plays out with a happy resolution for everybody. Is there any solution that we can think of where Cuomo and de Blasio both can reach some sort of compromise, both can declare victory, both can have it both ways? Or are they just too far apart from each other with Cuomo running anti-taxes?
Both ways is going to be universal pre-K, but it's not going to be funded by a tax increase on the rich.
That's not a compromise.
Well, that's a compromise as far as the governor is concerned, because as Mr. Brodsky argues, Mr. Cuomo is looking ahead towards the future and
if
how
the
he is seen.
legislature in both houses decides to support this, Cuomo's position becomes untenable. He's got to not just muscle de Blasio, he's got to muscle the Assembly and the Senate It gets tougher and tougher.
This is not only about 2014, and this is about Cuomo has a wider vision, which is to run for national office, and he is scared to death to run having raised taxes on anybody, including the rich, even 0.5 or 1/4%. That's what this is about.
Explain that to me. Why in a Democratic primary, where the Democratic electorate cares about income inequality and taxing the rich, why is adopting Paul Ryan's economic theory good for Cuomo?
Because he's not adopting Paul Ryan's. It is very difficult to run, Cuomo believes it's difficult to run and win in a general election. I'm not talking the primaries, win in a general national election in the United States today, having had to stand on a platform of having raised taxes. And he may be right about that.
You got to get to the primaries.
Well, of
before
course.
you
That's
get
the
to
first
the
thing I
general.
was
But
thinking.
do
The
you
Democratic
really think
Party is-
that? Don't you think that's why Cuomo has run so far to the left on so many social issues? He's trying to have it both ways.
He is a come on. Progractionary.
That's it.
I've been
And-
saying this for 2 years.
So you'll say I'm
left,
right
left,
again.
left. Well, I'm saying you're late to the party, but you're right. Left,
I'll take it,
left on
Richard.
social issues, right on economics. The Democratic Party, nationally in New York, is not with him on his economic policy.
Yeah, but my point is we keep talking about 2014, and absolutely he doesn't want to run for governor again and get reelected and get a small margin, which he won't, and he doesn't want to raise taxes before that. But this is not just about 2014. This is about his vision of himself in the future in American politics.
He may even, even if he did raise taxes in New York City or allowed them to go up, he might still win New York City by a larger margin than de Blasio did.
But
So
it's called. But the professor's right. It's called not boxing yourself
Right.
in.
He wants that. He wants the freedom to run the way he thinks he can win.
Before we get off mayoral politics here, one more piece of business, and this is a very minor thing, but the Times was reporting today that the final Welcome to New York sign, Welcome to New York City sign, went up at the Outer Bridge crossing today. Last of 53 signs to be changed from Bloomberg to de Blasio and to include the new borough presidents. Total cost is $27,000. Now, New York State doesn't put names on signs. They changed that during the Pataki administration. New Jersey does. Every time you enter the state, it's Welcome to New Jersey, Chris Christie, governor of the state. We all know why people like to do this. They want to see their names. Is this just stupid?
Please.
Is it time for this to go away?
The coverage of this is stupid. That's different. Put the signs up. Yeah, of course. Let everybody. Get a life, will you?
In fairness to Mr. Brodsky, let's assume for 1 second.
Don't change your policy now, Dominic.
No.
You're going to get fair.
let's-
I'm going to come back at you.
Let's assume that we're in office for 1 second.
Oh,
Sure.
please.
Wouldn't we want our names up? I was driving over, I think, the 138th Street Bridge from Harlem to the Bronx this weekend, and I saw the sign that said Ruben Diaz Jr., borough president, and Bill de Blasio, mayor. And I was like, wow, that's up quick.
Yeah.
But think about it. If we were elected, would you, and of course it's
And I have to
27,000.
say, I have a bias in favor of this because when I was younger, we traveled across the country in a van, and I liked going into new states and seeing the governor's name and going into cities and seeing the
Fair enough.
It was, as a kid, it was really kind of exciting. I liked it. I don't just like, welcome to Colorado, we legalize pot,
Fair.
I mean, it's like,
What's the price tag again? Yeah,
27
legalized pot.
27,000 for the
That's not
58 bridges or entrances to New York
New
City.
York should bring it back, the state.
You really think so?
I like it.
After we went from
I'm
Spitzer
biased.
to Patterson to
Well, we
that
changed
quickly.
fast, but yeah.
we need it on a swivel just in case. All right, let's say you're a president who can't seem to get anything passed by an obstructionist Congress. What do? How about ignore Congress? President Obama planning to address Congress, and he'll explain why he's ready to ignore them, at least on some issues. So is that effective governing or just asking for trouble? We're going to debate that next.